talk to you all again. So I'm going to talk right now, I'm yelling, about joy's resistance, centering women of color and queer students in undergraduate mathematics. And this is primarily the work of my two colleagues. So this is Sierra Street, who was a previous graduate student of mine. We're drawing on part of her dissertation work, which was centering the experiences of women of color in undergraduate mathematics. And my colleague Matt Voigt, whose dissertation work was centering the experiences of queer students in undergraduate mathematics. So this is a project bringing both of those works together. Matt, unfortunately, was not able to be here. So he was originally going to give the talk, but since I'm here, I get to talk to you again. Okay, so I think it's very worthwhile that we get to thank you again. And I would really love some shared applause. I don't know if we're going to have a time to do this again at the end of this time. So, Michael, you've been an amazing host for me personally, and this conference is just, it's a really joyful conference to be a part of. And certainly that's not all on you, but you've done a really great job setting the stage, and it just feels really calm and lovely, and I feel very well fed. So, and caffeinated, so thank you. Oh yeah, and all of you for making it to the last day. So thank you for sticking it out. For folks who are online, thanks for sticking it out. This has been a great and long talk or conference. Also, again, I would like to thank and pay gratitude to the Indigenous and First Nations people all over the world, especially those of the regions here and the regions at my home. And today is Thanksgiving in the United States. And so in addition to being a horrific day, absolutely, and I think first and foremost, like it should be a day of grief in our United States. It is also very much celebrated, including by my family, as a day of eating turkeys. And so I did just want to share very briefly, here's a picture of the turkey that my family's eating. We raised it, and there it is. So they're like literally eating it right now. So those are up-to-date pictures. Okay, so why study joy in mathematics, and specifically why to study women of color and queer students' joy in mathematics? Well, first, as I shared on Tuesday, when our grant was canceled, and also just the climate in the US of not being able to talk about equity explicitly, it made me reflect on why I do equity work and what that means for me. And my core drive is that I want more people to feel good doing mathematics, especially for people who are marginalized in various ways, and those marginalizations are preventing barriers for them to get to engage with enjoying mathematics. Like, that's my driving force. We also can draw on universal design for learning. This is a tool that, for me, really tells me that centering the experiences of those most marginalized in our populations is not only important to improve their experiences, but it's also a really useful window on seeing how we can improve the experiences for all people. So a canonical example of this is the curb bumps that are used that were developed to help people using wheelchairs get around. Those are also really useful for moms and parents using strollers, for example. So that's kind of like the quick canonical, but I think we can think about it much more deeply within our mathematics classes. And then lastly, drawing on Carolyn's talk, I sure think that centering joy in general, and especially women of color and queer folks' joy in mathematics, is a better thing to center than money and war. So if we're trying to figure out, well, shoot, if I don't want to center nuclear war and like profit margins to determine what mathematics I'm teaching, can we instead center folks' joy as a driver of what we decide to focus on? So that's what we're going to look at today. Okay, so what is joy? From a review of literature focusing on joy in the field of psychology, there's a couple different ways that we can think about what joy is. As an emotion, a positive state involving one's perception of feeling good or experiencing something as a gift, kind of this is more in a moment. As a disposition, being a joyful person, kind of as a mood, feeling like a good, joyful mood. or is a more deep spiritual fruit. So both having the disposition of joy, but having some like bigger additional piece, which is involving a constant pervasive spiritual sense of satisfaction, confidence, or gratitude. While I think all of these sound really wonderful, we're going to focus really on thinking about joy as an emotion. So this is more like that fleeting experience within the maths experience, having good feelings. Okay, so before we get into that, with that very brief background on joy, can you all just take some time to think individually? We're going to do a quiet thinking for a moment. Bring to mind a time when you have experienced mathematical joy.
Doing mathematics or sharing mathematics?
Well, that's interesting. I'm going to call it all doing mathematics. So I think as I'm teaching mathematics, I still feel as though I'm doing mathematics. And so I would say that counts. So generally, a joyful experience doing mathematics. Got it? Okay, will you turn to someone near you? This isn't a long conversation. I just want you to share your joy with another person and then hear their joy. You too, Michael. I'll check it. Okay, take your notes a little bit. Make sure that everybody you're talking to is sharing their joy and everyone's listening. Okay, wrap up those last thoughts if you can, please. All right, I love this. And I'm going to ask us to bring it home. Because that was really joyful for me to hear you all sharing your joy. But let's hear from some of you. Also because Michael's being real chill about time in a very bossy way. Like, I was like, do I really only have 5 minutes? It's like, I don't know. Time for as long as you want. It won't be that long. But 1 or 2 experiences that people really want to share. Thank you.
Well, I was teaching those lines at the
Oral comes really close to you.
You may. I was teaching farmers.
I don't know.
Hello? Yeah. No? Yes. Okay, I won't shout then. I was teaching there were 4 people who'd come up from a farm from southwest of WA, came up one day to do all their classes. And usually I give about 4 or 5 complete explanations of hypothesis testing. And I was giving my last one to them because they were only there on that one day, so that's the only chance I had. And suddenly one of them said, "Stop, Anne, I've got it. Don't give me another explanation." And in actual fact, I hadn't actually used any different words. Whether I'd done any difference, I don't know. But that to me was lovely that they suddenly got it. That was a joy.
Thank you, Anne. One more? Okay, that's okay, because we have plenty of sharings from students. So we'll spend some more time with them.
That we explore this broad question: how do women of color and queer students experience joy in pre-calculus and calculus? Now we're going to answer this using quantitative and qualitative data, and based on some conversations here and presentations, I ended up adding some slides to talk a little bit more about quantitative data methodology that comes from an anti-deficit perspective. So to do this, we're really drawing on the work of data feminism and quant crit. Here are a couple citations if you're all interested in this. And these really give us some principles for engaging in quantitative data analysis, both of large data sets and even smaller data sets, to come from an anti-deficit lens. So first of all, one of these principles says like all analysis is biased, not only qualitative analysis. So I think in our field, like we're pretty comfortable understanding that when we engage in I should say most of us, I think, are pretty comfortable understanding that when we engage in qualitative data analysis, that we as the researcher, like we're engaging with data and we're working with that data to understand it from our lens. There's not some, we're not in a positivist perspective anymore where we believe like there is some specific objective finding within the data and our job is just to like rigorously engage with it and find the answer, right? Like, well, at least for the group of researchers I engage with a lot, like we're there with qualitative analysis. It's much newer to recognize we're also there with quantitative analysis. Like no matter what data we're engaging with, large data sets, small data sets, quantitative, qualitative, like we as researchers are humans engaging with that data. And so what that means is that there's decisions in how we analyze and present our data. We can choose to be open about those biases, and some people do, where we're starting to see more positionality statements, even in quantitative analyses. But regardless of if you're being open about those biases or not, like we can choose an anti-deficit lens in the analysis and in the presentation of that analysis. And so earlier, I just wanted to call this out because I think we say like let the data tell its own story, and I appreciate that perspective, but also I want to push back against it a little bit. Respectfully, that like data doesn't have its own story to tell objectively. Like there's only a story to tell because we're humans engaging with that data, and it's our job to interact with that data and then identify the story that we want to tell. So some tips that we employ to engage with these principles, or some actions that we employ in this analysis. So we choose to not do comparisons to dominant populations. And this isn't like an all or never thing. It depends on the analysis and what the point is. So I'm just sharing some of the decisions that we've made through this. And these are back and forth conversations. Like, is it interesting for us to compare to white male students' joy or not? Like, do we just want to share the enjoyment data from the students that we're centering in our population, or do we want to compare it to the broader population? Do we do that overall or to specific populations? So for this analysis, we've decided to not do it to specific dominant populations, but we do contextualize it in the overall data set. So that was a choice. Another choice we made is to contextualize our data with qualitative data. So when we have this, I'll share, it's like a 40,000 student data set. Because we have 2 dissertations coming out of it, we can also contextualize it with deeply developed qualitative data, which is great. That's not always available to you. But trying to understand a little bit more about like what these data points mean to humanize them so that we can think about, even in the example with the cigarette smoking, of like, oh, there's this cluster up here, like, yeah, in a data way, they look like this, but let's look at all this cluster and try to understand like, how are these people spending, they make less than $10,000, but they're smoking 25 packs of cigarettes a day. Like, let's really think about what that data point means and try to understand what that can look like is a helpful way of remembering that these dots on a graph are humans. Understanding deficits as telling us something about the educational system's deficits. So I don't see any human in the room, is that true? Okay, so I'm sorry for that, because I wanted to come back to the comment I had yesterday, where, is that how I say his name? Nazim. Yeah. So, but the comment yesterday that I had of like, when we're looking at differences between girls and boys students, that those deficits in the data, I'm not saying those don't exist. Like, that's a rich analysis of sport. Like, we're researchers with strong tools. Like, I'm not trying to say like, don't show that data. But when we do, like if there's a deficit there in the achievement between boys and girls or white students and indigenous students, that's telling us information about the system, the educational system. It's not telling us information about those students. And so it's a positioning of how we make sense of this data. Okay, cool. Here. Okay. So that was kind of, I wanted to add that because it's been really interesting. Oh, we have a raised hand because we've gotten to have more of these conversations. Oops, wrong way. There's scrolls.
I think they just raised their hand because they might have a question.
Oh, I'm talking right into it, but that might be from this morning or from earlier. That's fine.
Well, but now, yeah.
Okay. Is this better? Close to the mic. Did it turn off? Oh, oh, it died. I can hear.
Sorry. Yeah, 5 more minutes is great. I'll wrap it up. I'll get off my soapbox here. Okay, so we had data from 34,000 students from introductory math classes at 21 universities in the US. We focused on change in mathematical enjoyment over the course of a semester. The populations we focused on were women of color and gender queer or gender marginalized students, 2 different framings. And so this is what that looked like. Because we had such a huge data set, we were able to end up with almost 15,000 students identified as gender marginalized. This was women and also trans students and also students who self-identified as gender fluid or other terms that worked for them. And then specifically, we had over 5,000 students were gender marginalized people of color. So having such a large data set allows us to do statistics that we're not always able. Okay, so I'll be quick on this because I soapboxed for too long. So this is the quantitative analysis that I want to show. It's brief, but we asked, to what degree do you agree or disagree with this statement, I enjoy mathematics? And we asked at the beginning and the end of the term. Blue is overall student population, orange is gender marginalized, and green is gender marginalized people of color. I was going to have you take a minute and think about what you noticed, but I'll just share some of the things that I noticed. All students have a decrease in enjoyment. Marginalized groups start lower, and there's a steeper decline for gender marginalized people of color. I'm going to keep going if that's okay. I heard a reaction, but okay. So we also contextualize with qualitative data, and I want to make sure that I share a little bit of this. So Sierra's dissertation involved interviewing 12 women of color who had graduated from their STEM majors or were seniors and had been a part of this survey in their first or second year. Sample diversity in terms of gender, race, degree, and university. She collected math autobiographies and individual interviews about their experiences and feelings related to undergrad math, including enjoyment. So her focus of her dissertation was not on enjoyment, but this came up. Similarly, Matt's dissertation focused on queer students' experiences. He was able to interview 17 queer students at 4 universities across the US. He conducted 2 semi-structured interviews with students about their math identity, queerness, and experiences pursuing a STEM degree, also including enjoyment, but not solely focused on it. So the themes of joy that came up from these 2 populations of students for which there was an overlap, but not specifically in the same person wasn't involved in both of their dissertations, but there were queer students who identified as people of color, and there were women of color who identified as queer as well. And so here are the 6 themes of joy: aha moments and understandings, real-world applications and relevance, positive and supportive instructor relationships, interactive hands-on learning activities, perseverance in mathematical challenge, and personal connection and identity in the classroom. I have data from each of these, and I think to be respectful of time, I'd like to just share one that's the least clear. So a lot of these are fairly straightforward. The personal identity and connection in the classroom was the most confusing one to me because we have these 2 very different quotes. So From Aaron, we see they say there's history behind that, and it does pertain a little bit to my identity. And it's like, wow, this is actually kind of cool. I would feel like it would be good to include LGBTQ history in math problems. So like engaging in data analysis that includes queer students' experiences or something like that. But here's Swappy, who says STEM classes require the least of your personal identity as a matter of the subject. You as a person is not relevant to the science you're learning. There's not going to be an involvement of your gayness in that math class. So this student was actually sharing that they appreciated that this was a space where like their gayness didn't seem relevant to their learning. And so there's some nuance here of how students engage with this. Like some of them really liked that this could be a classroom space to bring in their identities, and some actually appreciated a feeling of math as objective and that this was a space to not. So I'm leaving you with that one because it's not straightforward, but I think it's important for us to try to learn more from our students and think deeply about this. Okay, so let's say thank you. We have maybe a moment for
Questions, comments for Jess?
I don't think about it.
Great.
I
Thank you.
thought that was really great. Thank you very much. Pity we didn't get to see all of it.
Yeah.
But all I was going to say is I thought it was really interesting that those 6 things about joy did not include competitiveness, which, yeah, and I thought that was,
Or achievement, really.
or achievement. I think that was
Understanding,
really
yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for
Thanks.
pointing that out. Any other brief comments? Sorry for yelling. Yeah, Jim.
Thanks a lot. That was great. It was really just about your last sort of puzzle there. But actually, look, we've run out of time. Maybe, yeah. Sorry, I've got the microphone. I'll speak to you at lunchtime.
Yeah, right on.
Okay, yeah. I've got some thoughts about the puzzle.
Cool.
Thank you.